Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We are brought to you today by ExpressVPN. Protect your online activity today and find out how you can get 3 months of that protection free at expressvpn.com/martini. We have bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today, so let's just dive right in. Two of them deal with the controversy over Brett Kavanaugh now and Dr. Christine Ford, who is, of course, alleging that he tried to sexually assault her back in the early 1980s when they were high school students. So the process of where this Senate committee work goes from here is a matter of great debate. First, the chairman, Chuck Grassley, wanted to have a series of calls yesterday. The Democrats balked on that. Now he has set a hearing for the committee next Monday for both Kavanaugh and Ford to appear before the committee. And the Democrats, just 2 days ago, Jim, were all about Dr. Ford being fully heard out on this and having a chance to speak before the committee. But now that Chuck Grassley's actually invited her, says she hasn't actually responded to him yet. I'm sure she will at some point. The Senate Democrats on this committee are balking at that idea until the FBI can get involved. But even though they want the FBI to do the investigation, they've already decided who is telling the truth here. Let's start with CBS This Morning and Kamala Harris.
I believe that that the FBI, Nora, to your point, it should be compelled to do its job in terms of completing their background investigation. Well, listen, I think it's going to be it comes down to credibility, to your point, Gail, and it's going to be about listening to what each party has to say. But I believe her. Listen, first of all, anybody who comes forward at this point to be prepared to testify in the United States Senate against someone who is being nominated to one of the most powerful positions in the United States government, that takes an extraordinary amount of courage.
So we need to let the investigation proceed, but I already know who's telling the truth. Dick Blumenthal, pretty much the same thing with Rachel Maddow last night on MSNBC.
My strong belief is that there has to be a full, fair FBI investigation before that hearing so that we know facts and we're not just asking questions in the dark. And I just want to be very emphatic. I believe the survivor, Dr. Ford. There's every reason to believe a woman who has come forward at great personal risk, facing the anguish and terror, as she put it, of a nightmare of vicious and hostile scrutiny.
So, Jim, after 4 days of abject silence, the Democrats clearly have their talking points ready to go here.
Yeah. First of all, my understanding is that as of this morning, a Department of Justice spokesman said that he did not believe there would be any FBI investigation because as of now, there is no federal crime that has been alleged in the account. I suppose you could go to a local jurisdiction in Maryland and ask them to open up an investigation. There is no statute of limitations on rape in the state of Maryland. Of course, to do that, Greg, we would need a specific locality as opposed to just the county. I believe it was Montgomery County. Perhaps the county law enforcement authorities could open up an investigation. But even then, we're left with the question, what would they investigate? We don't have a scene of the crime. There is no location to investigate. It is 36 years ago. There are no forensics that remain. There is one witness she has named, Mr. Judge, and he said it did not happen. She mentioned other people at the party. The Post has not been able to reach those people. We don't know whether those people will come forward. If they did come forward and corroborated her story, that would be a very big deal. The evidence would start to tilt in her direction. Short of that, we don't have a specific date. We have a general time of year that it was towards the end of her sophomore year in high school. We don't have a specific location, and the one named witness does not concur with her assessment of events. I don't know what the FBI is supposed to do beyond this. It's not like there's some sort of, secret computer that can, analyze stuff from 30-some years ago. This is probably going to come down to her word against his, and I guess I'm foreshadowing our third martini here. But again, I'd really love for any of these senators to say, what do you want to look back on? These schools already said, Georgetown Prep said they never heard about anything along these lines while Kavanaugh was attending. Greg, yesterday we saw two former girlfriends of Brett Kavanaugh from his high school years and early college years come forward and say that they never saw him exhibit any behavior like this at all. I think I concur, Greg, with Noah Rothman's assessment. I can't think of anything more awkward than having to go to ex-girlfriends and ask them to provide character testimony. Lots of people have ugly breakups and things that don't work out that well. So maybe it says something about Brett Kavanaugh that two of his ex-girlfriends came forward and said he was never like this. To these Democratic senators, it is very clearly they're trying to set up this catch-22. We must delay the confirmation vote. This cannot go forward, but we can't just have this, can't handle this week. No, we got to do at least next week, and this has to be pushed off. Look, I was just doing the math in my head. We're close like 50-some days to Election Day. I don't see any reason why you can't resolve this, barring some sort of new revelation, barring some sort of new piece of evidence. It's going to come down to the testimony of Kavanaugh and his account that he never attended this sort of party, never committed any act remotely like this, her account, and I believe Judge's account. And it'd be interesting to see if Judge ends up getting subpoenaed by the committee or at the very least asked to testify. As of this moment, these are the only three people we know of. And these, according to her account, these are the only three people who were in the room. Two of them say it didn't happen. One said it did. I don't know what more information the committee thinks it's going to get out of this. So, yeah, it's fairly clear that Democrats want to run out the clock. I don't think you can delay 50 days once you've heard the testimony from all three. I know I've heard some folks kind of murmuring under their breath, but it might be more politically advantageous for Republicans to have a different nominee, and people who were really hoping for Amy Barrett the first time are kind of saying, well, we wouldn't have this problem if we nominated Barrett or something like that. Look, if we believe in wanting to have a fair process, whatever comes out of this will establish the precedent of what happens when there's an accusation of an event that occurred 36 years ago and no supporting evidence. And there are a lot of people who want to establish a new standard that the accusation itself is sufficient evidence of guilt. I don't think that's a very good idea. I think you're going to end up with a lot of accusations, both accurate and not accurate. And we can point to cases like the Duke lacrosse team and the University of Virginia Rolling Stone article and Mattress Girl at Columbia. And we can also look at cases where there were accusations against figures that initially seemed implausible and turned out to be true. Bill Cosby comes to mind, Roman Polanski, Mike Tyson, right? I mean, there are people who get accused of sexual assault and juries find them guilty. I don't know what the Senate thinks it's going to find in this process. There's nothing wrong with having this hearing. But once this hearing is done, I'm not sure there's really no reason to delay this. I think everybody knows what they already knows what they believe. And, you saw those comments from Blumenthal and Harris. They already decided. But again, they said they were voting against this guy the night he was nominated or shortly thereafter. So what more do we need to see? What more do we need to know after this hearing on Monday? I don't think Democrats have a good answer, but I don't think anyone's really going to hold them accountable for having a better answer than that. Greg?
Right. Yeah. No pun intended here, but confirmation bias exists all over the place here because, like you said, they've already decided that whoever Trump was going to nominate, they were going to oppose. So shock of all shock, they believe the accuser. If the tables were turned, I'm sure they'd have a very different view of this. But, Jim, let's spend a moment on the closest thing we have to a good martini today, and that is the excellent product and service available through ExpressVPN. With all the recent news about online security breaches, it's hard not to worry about where your data goes. Making an online purchase or simply accessing your email could put your private information at risk. Bottom line, you're being tracked, literally tracked online by social media sites, marketing companies, and your mobile or internet provider. Not only can they record your browsing history, but they often sell it to other corporations who want to profit from your information. And that's why it's really exciting that you now have the opportunity to take back your privacy by using ExpressVPN.
ExpressVPN has easy-to-use apps that run seamlessly in the background of your computer, phone, and tablet. Turning on ExpressVPN protection just takes one click. ExpressVPN secures and anonymizes your internet browsing by encrypting your data and hiding your public IP address. Protecting yourself with ExpressVPN costs less than $7 a month. It is rated the #1 VPN service by TechRadar and comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you ever use public Wi-Fi and want to keep hackers and spies from seeing your data, ExpressVPN is the solution. And if you don't want to hand over your online history to your internet provider or data resellers, ExpressVPN is the answer.
Right now, for 3 Martini Lunch listeners, you can protect your online activity today and find out how you can get 3 months of that protection free at expressvpn.com/martini. That's EXPRESSVPN.com/martini. expressvpn.com/martini for 3 months free when you get a 1-year package. Visit expressvpn.com/martini to learn more. All right, Jim, as you mentioned a moment ago, as we head to our second bad martini now, midterm election day, just 7 weeks from today. And everybody's been talking about a blue wave. A lot of the experts, certainly the inside the Beltway crowd, and we know that usually midterm elections don't go the way of the party of the president. And in a lot of cases, people are now predicting, for example, the House to go to Democratic control after these elections. And you've even got Chuck Schumer and some others saying, hey, don't even count us out on the Senate side yet, even though the numbers are certainly more in the Republicans' favor. But a big problem for the Republicans might be that their own people are so complacent because everyone said that Trump was going to lose 2 years ago, and then he didn't lose. New York Times. America First Action, a political committee aligned with Mr. Trump, conducted a series of focus groups over the summer and concluded the party had a severe voter turnout problem brought on in part by contentment about the economy and a refusal by Republicans to believe that Democrats could actually win the midterm elections. Conservative-leaning voters in the study routinely dismissed the possibility of a Democratic wave election, with some describing the prospect as fake news, said an official familiar with the research, who spoke on condition of anonymity because the data was not intended to be disclosed. Breaking that attitude of complacency is now the Republicans' top priority, far more than wooing moderates with gentler messaging about economic growth. Over at Axios, a source who has seen recent polling conducted by the Republican National Committee told me the data show that a majority of Trump voters don't believe the mountain of evidence that Democrats will win back the House in November. By the numbers, 57% of strong Trump supporters believe it's unlikely that Democrats will win back the House. Nate Silver gives the Democrats an 83% chance of winning back the House, but obviously that can change. So the fact that a lot of people were wrong, certainly about the Electoral College projections in 2016, is leading to a complacency, which is always a problem when your party has the presidency. But this year, it appears to be a severe case of it.
Greg, how many times in life have we seen that the easiest way to ensure that you are not going to win is to be absolutely certain that you're going to win? Here's the thing. In of itself, I've heard Republican consultants grumbling about the fact that every time Trump talks about a red wave, his voters believe it. I think that's pretty much been demonstrated clearly in all of the polling. You don't want your voters being really super duper confident. I've interestingly heard some arguments that the polling, the focus numbers, all the data on the ground, get out the vote efforts, et cetera, for Ted Cruz doesn't look that bad for him. And it's worth noting, I don't believe there's been a single poll that has had him losing yet. But the single most dangerous thing for Ted Cruz in Texas is that all the Republicans in Texas that he's going to win because this is Texas and he's a Republican. Because if that happens, people don't show up, people don't volunteer, people don't knock on doors, they don't phone bank, they don't get as active as they usually do because they think this thing's in the bag. And lo and behold, you end up losing. And if you don't believe me, ask Eric Cantor, former congressman from Virginia. This is how you lose these sorts of races, right? You walk into it overconfident. This is what happened for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Almost every great upset in political history has had some element of an incumbent saying, nah, we're doing fine. We're going to be okay. Historical patterns point to us. Now, the great irony, of course, is that historical patterns don't point to good things for President Trump and the Republicans. Because this works both ways. We've seen it in 2006. We've seen it in 2010. We've seen it in 2014. What happens is a president wins, and generally they've got some level of a wave, right? And because of that, you got a higher turnout in a presidential year. Some folks who wouldn't win because they ordinarily do catch some presidential coattails. This certainly happened for Democrats in 2008. This certainly happened for Democrats in 2012. Come back 2 years later, all of a sudden the folks who turned out to vote for Obama don't show up anymore, and you're in deep doo-doo and you end up losing. That's what happened last time. I think it's a really interesting and fair question that we're going to ask after this midterm election is, are the Trump voters coming out? The turnout in that special election up in Ohio, which Republicans held on by the skin of their teeth, look, 90% of the Hillary voters came out. About 40-some% of the Trump voters came out. Now, thankfully, because of the demographics for the district, Republicans managed to hold on. But basically, I kind of wonder if, Trump voters are, for lack of a better comparison, the new Obama voters. They're really excited in presidential years. But if Trump's not on the ballot, they're just not that interested. And that's a very ominous spot for Republicans. So the more you talk about the red wave, the president needs to stop talking about the red wave. if Republicans want to have a red wave, they need to start believing. They need to start acting like it's a blue wave. Any team that goes into any practice saying, "Nah, it's okay. We're playing the Cleveland Browns. We're going to win." It's very appropriate that I say that this week, Greg, because on Thursday night the Jets will go to Cleveland, and it's no longer a streak of defeats. It's now a streak of non-victories after their tie on opening day this year. You can't go into it thinking you totally got this, locked away, because that's when the ground falls out from underneath your feet. So we will see how this happens. But if things turn out really badly on Election Day for Republicans, a chunk of it will be that a chunk of Republican-leaning voters didn't believe they were in trouble and didn't take the necessary steps to ensure victory.
So the first rule of Red Wave is don't talk about Red Wave.
Yes. Very much like Fight Club.
All right, let's move on to our crazy martini now, Jim, and back to the Kavanaugh situation. Most people who follow politics closely know who Matthew Dowd is. He came onto the scene as one of the campaign strategists / media experts for George W. Bush. Never really been a conservative, really only been a quasi-Republican at times. Considers himself an independent. Now he's a hardcore never-Trumper, and he's got a big job. I don't know if he's the political director, but he's got a big job at ABC News on the political side. And he's also decided that he's going to believe Dr. Ford in this standoff with Brett Kavanaugh because she's a woman. A couple different tweets here from Matthew Dowd. First of all, quote, "Enough with the he said, she said storyline. If this is he said, she said, then let's believe the she in these scenarios. She has nothing to gain and everything to lose. For 250 years, we have believed the he in these scenarios. Enough is enough." Another tweet, and yes, the never-Trumpers and the left are still on this. Here's one step to heal the country. President Trump withdraws the Kavanaugh nomination and substitutes Merrick Garland instead. Since GOP went out of their way to say Garland and Kavanaugh sided together 90% of the time, then they should have no problem, unquote. Jim, over the 8 years of the George W. Bush administration, there are certain things he did that I liked, other things he did that I definitely didn't like. But one of the lasting stains from the Bush era is the fact that this guy still has a megaphone.
If you claim to be nonpartisan, but you always come down believing one side, then I don't really think you're all that nonpartisan anymore. The Merrick Garland thing is just fairly ridiculous. It's the same way where people go through these convoluted scenarios that end up with Hillary Clinton being appointed president in some sort of scenario because Democrats win the House, name Hillary Speaker, because the Speaker doesn't have to be a member of the House, then they impeach both Trump and Pence simultaneously, and that kind of that's fan fiction. Okay, I mean, if you're going to fantasize, I can just think of a lot more fun things to fantasize about. But fine, it's your life. Do whatever you want to do with it. Regarding the he said, she said, we're getting into a really dangerous area here because I listed off the examples of false accusations before: Duke Lacrosse, University of Virginia, Mattress Girl. And I listed the cases where, sometimes the accuser is very much telling the truth. Believe all women is as foolish as believe all men, right? There is no truth-telling gene that attaches itself to either two X chromosomes or an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. Neither gender is, I just realized how much people I've set off by saying neither gender, suggesting there's only two.
It's all right. It's a podcast for conservatives, Jim. You go right ahead.
Yeah. So the idea that either gender has a monopoly on truth-telling, that any group of human beings are above wrongdoing, the temptation to sin, the temptation to lie, the temptation to either make a false accusation or exaggerate bad behavior in order to ruin the reputation of someone else. Look, you can only believe that if you've never encountered human beings in your life, right? This is an entirely theoretical perspective of how people are. Now, look, does this mean that everyone who comes, I very much subscribe to this idea that the people who come forward should not necessarily be attacked. And I don't think anything I've said necessarily could be fairly characterized as an attack. On the other hand, if you're going to accuse someone of a serious crime, for people to give it credence, for people to believe you, it helps if there's evidence. We don't have that in this case. Matthew Dowd doesn't need that. Matthew Dowd has made up his mind. And he's made up his mind because of the gender. I'm really curious and I'm sure he's getting pelted with this question on Twitter. I have not yet seen him respond to that. Does he concur with this? I believe the she in the Keith Ellison case. This is the former DNC vice chair and congressman who's running for Minnesota Attorney General. His former girlfriend has made a whole litany of ugly allegations, but as of now, it is nothing's been proven. It's really interesting how many people are going to have that on again, off again attitude of believe all women except when it's someone they want. And of course, many people have pointed out, what happens in the day Matthew Dowd is accused of doing something terrible? The foolishness of this, and what it is this idea of identity politics being extended to questions of guilt and innocence. My colleague Charlie Cook has a very good post about this today. I urge everyone to read it. It really does. You talked about confirmation bias, something called motivated reasoning, right? You come to the conclusion you want to have, and you work backwards for the reasoning process that will lead you to that conclusion. If you really like Keith Ellison and you really don't like Brett Kavanaugh, you try to think through, okay, how is the Ellison accuser's account implausible, but the Kavanaugh account plausible? And if you are a hardcore partisan on the other side, just flip it around the other way. This is not the way the system of justice works, and this is not, I keep thinking about if something isn't acceptable in a court of law, why should it be acceptable in the court of public opinion? Unfortunately, there are much fewer rules for the court of public opinion, Greg.
I think that's exactly right. And if there had been some scandal and been a female Trump appointee or Trump nominee, I guarantee you he'd have taken the other side. That's just the way Matthew Dowd operates now. Jim, have a great day. We'll do this again tomorrow. Our ugly week rolls on.
Thank God it's Friday. Oh, it's not even Friday, is it? We're not even halfway there, Greg.
At least you got the Jets on a Thursday this week, so you have something to look forward to before
until we lose to Cleveland, Greg. First team in 2 years to do that.
Optimism. Not too much optimism. Not red wave optimism, but have some optimism.
You're not getting me. From now on, when somebody's ludicrously overconfident, we're just going to call it a red wave moment.
Oh, that'll probably be good for the Jets this year, too. And maybe the Bears. Jim, talk to you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And be sure to tune in again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch. And don't forget to visit our good friends over at ExpressVPN, expressvpn.com/martini to find out how you can get 3 months free to protect your online activity.